This is the 5th video in a series of 6 where I go over how to draft on every mode in every map for July 2022 of Power League. And in this video, we're going to be going over Hot Zone. If you like what you see today, be sure to like and subscribe, and also check the links down below for every other video in this series, as well as a link to the guide images themselves. And with that out of the way, let's get right into this. So, the first map is Ring of Fire, which a common thread you will see throughout this season of Hot Zone is that playing the objective and actually staying on top of the zone is probably the most important thing in this meta right now. So that'll come in the form of either being able to prevent the enemies from walking near the zone with some preventative measures, or just being able to tank inside of the zone and just sit inside of the zone while the enemies are still alive. So right now, just being able to tank inside of the zone is going to be more important than actually controlling. But with that being said, of course, there are going to be some best options for you to look out for on Ring of Fire. So those will be the likes of the common overpowered brawlers, the likes of Bonnie, Janet, and Carl, of course, but also the two brawlers that have slowing gadgets. So Crow and Squeak are especially notable on this map. Squeak is definitely the less safe option of the two, and maybe not necessarily weaker, but both of them have their slowing abilities, which can make actually staying inside of the hot zone for the enemies way more difficult, because they can't dodge anymore once they get slowed, and it just becomes a huge headache for them. So these are two brawlers that I would definitely be prioritizing in your draft, because they can just make retaking control or maintaining control way easier for your team, especially on Ring of Fire. And then other brawlers that can do similar movement restriction abilities are also going to be very useful. So the likes of Bo and Penny are almost always going to be useful on this mode. So especially on this map, Penny can place her turret behind those walls that you have on the right side, and Bo can pretty much just lock down the entire middle on his own. So Bo especially is something I would be looking out for on this map, especially in Power League when you can't coordinate as well. Bo is very gross. And then of course, some other Ring of Fire staples that help you just stay inside of the zone and control that middle. The likes of Leon, Lola, and Pam from the last meta are still here. Leon being able to place that lollipop drop, which is going to be very useful in those middle interactions. And then Lola and Pam are very similar, so they can throw down their spawnable and have it tank a bunch of shots, get them to get that easy control, and then they're both good at long range and good at close range, even having synergies with brawlers like Byron and some other snipers that are also notable on this map. But Byron especially can play in the lane or in the middle, but we're seeing a lot of Byron lane right now, because what you can do is you can prevent an enemy from walking up on the right side or the left side, and you can just spam heals into your mid laner, the likes of Lola, Pam, Lou, or Amber. These brawlers that are good at long range and at close range are usually very good with Byron. And then B is coming into the forefront of this meta in general, but especially on Ring of Fire, she's able to play as a mid laner and also prevent those tankier strategies, those combinations of brawlers, even some meta brawlers like Carl and Bonnie. B is just super good against. So B is something I definitely wouldn't sleep on in Hot Zone in general, because she is like the best anti-meta option that we have in the game right now. And then in terms of rewarding picks, I already mentioned Squeak, but Squeak does something similar to Bo, Lou, and Amber, but he has it on a gadget instead of a super, so it's pretty broken. But then you also have the likes of snipers, which I see generally overplayed on this map because it's very easy to counter them with those tankier strategies. But if you're a confident sniper player, you should definitely give them a try in this meta, because they're like your anti-meta strategies right now. And then of course there are some other options. So tanks, in order to counter these brawlers that are weak to tanks, the likes of snipers can get countered by Daryl and Fang, but maybe they're not necessarily the most consistent options, and there are other tankier options in power picks that are generally going to be safer. I see Rico being overplayed on this map still, and while Rico can really win your lane pretty well, in terms of actually capturing the zone, he doesn't really do a lot. He just does not play the objective on this map. It's a similar story to Spike, but Spike fares a little bit better since he can support his mid laner with his cactus and with his super that acts sort of like Lou and Bo's. But generally these brawlers are not that good at capturing the zone, so I would maybe recommend against them. I think especially in Hot Zone, picking power picks is like the best strategy in general. Rarely is a rewarding pick going to be better than a power pick, just because it's way safer and way easier to play a power pick on this mode. And then some synergies. I already mentioned Byron in combination with these ranged and close range brawlers, but also on this map, pairing assassins with snipers can make the sniper's job just so much easier. Brawlers like Crow and Leon, and in small part Stu, but especially Crow and Leon, have gadgets that help snipers actually duel their opponent mid laner. So they can just make a sniper's job a whole lot easier. And if you want to play snipers, I would almost always recommend at least drafting one of the notable assassins on this map with them. And the next map is Dueling Beetles, which similarly to Ring of Fire has seen a shift away from the control meta of old and towards a more tanky meta in recent times. However, of course, we have some extremely notable brawlers that take advantage of what this map has to offer. So the likes of Penny, Squeak, Sprout, and Bonnie, I think, are the main brawlers you want to be looking out for on this map. So Squeak and Sprout especially, so there are a few things that render them being unsafe picks to actually draft early, but as a last pick, if they're not banned out and if there's no counters on the enemy team, they pretty much just instantly win the game, because so Sprout can just wall off the entire middle and prevent the enemy mid laner from capturing for like 30 seconds straight. It's kind of insane. And Squeak does something very similar, but he does it with his gadgets. So and Squeak is even less weak to his counters. So I think if you want to be prioritizing one of the two, Squeak is definitely something you should almost always be banning out on this map. He's a crazy brawler, but Sprout is also really broken on this map. Both of them very powerful last picks that I would not sleep on at all. And then Penny, newly coming into Hot Zone as a staple, especially on Dueling Beetles with its more close quarters combat. Penny, as a laner, can do fairly well. Even against ranged brawlers, she can tank a few shots with her high HP total and her barrel, so she can get into position, get her super, and once she gets her super, it's so hard to deal with. It's so hard to take down her cannon, because she can just place it in one of the corner walls and it just controls for like forever. She basically only needs one super and she wins the game. And even as a mid laner, she's even better, because you can just auto aim the opponent mid laner and she counters some of the best mid laners on this map. And some of those very notable mid laners will be the likes of Stu. In the case of Stu kind of just sits mid, places down his speed zone turret, and then he just kind of dances around the mid and just captures the zone over and over again, preventing the enemy mid laner from walking up. So Stu purely just captures the hot zone, and that could be super dangerous on this map. He can pretty much just, you may be able to hold control the entire game, but a Stu can kind of just capture the zone under your noses if you're trying to play a control game, which is why you want to be going for tankier mids on this map more often than not. So the likes of Lola and Pam, both of these brawlers functionally the same, where they're both good at long range and at close range, and they also just get their super and it tanks for them and they get free control. So definitely these are your best mid laners that I would be looking out for. But also the likes of Carl and Janet are good assassins for if you want to be controlling a little bit, especially in the lane. These brawlers can function really well as just like a targeted removal for annoying enemy brawlers. The likes of Bo and Lou and Amber all play similarly, so they use their supers in order to prevent the enemies from walking mid or walking into the lane, and it's just pretty gross once they have their supers. Crow and Leon showing up once again. They have really insane gadgets for this map. Crow actually notably being an amazing mid laner on this map for countering Stu. So if you want to be able to play Slimy and prevent those zero ping Stus from running you over, Crow is definitely the option for a mid I would go with. And then of course we have the lane meta on this map. So that's mostly going to be snipers ruling this meta, or the likes of Lola, but generally it's going to be snipers, because snipers can just shoot down the straightaways, have a really easy time, and they each have their own utility that lets them be better than the other in their own situations. So I think Byron is probably the best one. So Byron just able to heal his mid laner, also be able to malaise the enemy laners. And if you can hit two malaise supers on the enemies at the same time, that can just take them out of commission for like 10 seconds, and that can be super broken. So malaise is a really good star power on this map especially. And then you have Belle, who similarly has her ability to AoE people, so whenever the enemy team clumps up, she's able to bounce shots off of them really easily. She even has Nest Egg to prevent the enemies from walking into the enemy zone once you get control. So Belle can be a really solid option as a sniper as well. And then B, once again, don't sleep on B. B is an anti-tank. She counters those tankier options that can be played in mid or in lane, like the likes of Bonnie. And she pretty much just is your sniper if you don't want to be run over by those brawlers that just are fat and sit mid. So B is a very strong option on this map as well. And then in terms of rewarding picks, I already mentioned Sprout and Squeak being super broken on this map, but also if you want to go for a pure tank on this map, Fang is probably going to be your best option because it's very hard to dodge his shoes while you're in lanes because they're just straightaways, and he can just be very annoying. He can do a bunch of crazy super chaining while enemies clump up. It can be pretty insane. And then there's some other weirder options. I notably want to highlight Poco because his entire game plan is sit mid and be fat. You can't dodge me. I'm just gonna heal off of you. And he is pretty much like Stu in that he just purely plays the objective. And if the enemy team comp can't pinch a Poco, Poco can just snowball out of control. But when you're picking a Poco, you are risking the fact that your enemies don't know how to deal with Poco in order to play him effectively. So play Poco at your own risk, but he can be really gross, especially at those lower levels of Power League. And then you have some other random options. I also want to highlight Mortis as another tank, Mortis being the best counter pick to Squeak and Sprout imaginable. So if you somehow let those brawlers slip through the cracks, maybe pull out that Mortis. It's going to be really, really solid on this map. And the final map, and last but not least, my favorite map in the current Power League rotation is Split, and it is going to be pretty much the only map in the game where you are not going to have a mid lane. You have a right lane, and you have a left lane, and you have some space in the middle where sometimes tanks go. Sometimes it can be a good strategy to just send two brawlers on your easy side so you guarantee get control on that side, because if you lose your easy side, it can just snowball out of control. So sometimes you do really just want to capture your right side as fast as possible. So in terms of meta on this map, I'm pretty sure most people are aware of what the Split meta looks like. So that is going to be your classic ricocheting brawlers, the likes of Rico and Ruffs, and then some notable tank counter brawlers like Gale, and then OP brawlers like Carl and Squeak. So those are like your most notable brawlers on this map. However, outside of those OP brawlers, there are some new options really coming to the forefront on Split that haven't really been seen before. So the likes of Penny, Janet, Bonnie, Griff, and Surge, I think are especially notable to highlight. So Penny pretty much is similar to Carl, can fight at any range, especially with that salty barrel gadget. When she gets her super, it's just a lot of free control and makes the enemy team comps ability to actually dodge in their zone way harder. So Penny, extremely versatile brawler. I think Janet and Bonnie can similarly struggle for the same reason, since they can't really take down brawlers that have like a lot of regen or a lot of HP, but they're just really good and really easy at taking control at range. So these are two pretty safe brawlers. They might struggle a little bit in close quarters combat, but they are not something you want to be sleeping on this map either. And then the likes of Griff and Surge are probably the tank counters that play second fiddle to Gale, but I think Griff especially, he just creates his own like meta on this map where you can just break up all of the walls and just super hard counter those strategies that are just going for close quarters combat. So Griff, I would not sleep on this map. He's super insane. And then Surge, you can send him on either side. Once you get supers, you can carry your entire team, but you have to get those supers on Surge. Stu is a very similar story. Once you get his super, you can break up walls with your breakthrough gadget, and it can just make the capturing the enemy, especially the left side zone, a whole lot easier. He's also notably one of the only counters to Rico on this map, or a direct counter, I should say. And then in terms of rewarding picks, of course, on a map as close quarters as Split, you're going to see a lot of tank play, and I want to highlight Frank and Ash especially as being super busted on this map. there is a strategy where if you draft a Gale early, you can use your Spring Ejector gadget and just repeatedly throw in tanks into the left zone over and over again, pretty much disregarding control altogether. You just keep launching in your tanks and it's super broken. But even outside of pairing tanks with Gale, tanks like Frank and Ash just have such an insane HP total that you can just stay in the zone, prevent enemies from getting close to you, and Frank has that added utility of being able to break up the walls. And then I see Sprout being a little bit overplayed on this map as like a first pick, but Sprout can be weak to those tankier options, but if you can get him against an enemy team that doesn't have any tanks, Sprout can be so disgusting on this map. He also notably counters Ruffs, so if you're into that, Sprout is going to be a great option for you. And then other tanks like Daryl and Primo also work with the Gale strategy. And then there's some other brawlers, some other tanks, and also Spike. Spike can play at range, but his HP total is a bit lacking, so that makes him a little bit less versatile. And I already mentioned Gale tanks as a synergy on this map, and also the wall breaking strategy, but some notable things that actually take advantage of the wall breaking strategy are the likes of Lola, Bo, Bonnie, and Carl. All have really good range prowess and also don't necessarily falter in close range combat. So these brawlers I would notably want to draft with a Stu or a Griff. And then also something I want to mention is B Colt, which has been a strategy on this map historically, where you pair a Colt or maybe a Brock alongside some super ranged brawlers like B, and you can pretty much just control the zone while your enemy team drafts close range brawlers. And once all the walls are broken up, a brawler like B can just have her way. But in recent times, it's become a little bit too risky to draft a Colt on this map, especially if your teammates aren't coordinated with you. So I would advise against it, but it's something that can be viable and theoretically can be good in this meta that really favors close quarters combat. And with that, this has been the draft guide for July 2022 of Hot Zone. And once again, if you like what you saw, be sure to like and subscribe. See the links down below for the other videos in this series and the guide images themselves. And if you really liked what you saw, maybe you should follow me on my Twitter and my Reddit, where sometimes I post things there and maybe not on YouTube. And you can also get my guide images themselves on Reddit. So be sure to follow me there if you're interested. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.